What's up? How we doing, everyone? Welcome to the first-ish episode of the Lumos Fitness Podcast. I guess that's a working title for now. I'm Coach Sean. I work at Lumos Fitness Collective. I've been a coach there for quite some time now, almost half a decade. And yeah, Noah made the massive mistake of buying a bunch of recording equipment and kind of letting me run my own show. Now, we're probably thinking immediately, like right out of the gate, why? Why would we do this? There's like 900 million podcasts on the internet, and a large portion of them are dedicated to fitness. So, what's another voice just screaming into the echo? Well, it's kind of built into the title here, but this is meant for Lumos, and obviously, if people who don't go to our beautiful facility end up listening to this, hopefully they gain some insight too. But from my experience as someone who spends a disproportionate amount of time on the internet, there is a lot of podcasts out there, and a lot of podcasts that are talking about fitness. But there's a distinct lack of podcasts that maybe are talking about fitness for the regular person, right? We see a lot of podcasts out there that are talking to people at the highest level of sport, or they, are coaches within, the collegiate space, or high level strength and conditioning coaches, and they're talking about performance at the highest levels. And what I don't see a ton of, and where I saw the opportunity to even do this, was just that there's not a ton out there just talking to people with like real lives, people with jobs and kids and life outside of the gym, people who are just coming in for an hour a day to do their fitnessing and bounce and try and make the most of that hour. So the whole goal with this as we move forward is to have discussions and talk on topics that are mainly for the regular person, and to give everyone as much information as they need to really make the most out of their training, whatever that looks like for them, on a day-to-day basis. So over the course of this, we're gonna be talking about as many topics as we can. The goal is to talk to the other coaches here, talk to some members, get people's stories, and just try and put as much helpful information out into the internet ethos as possible. And really, basically, just give me an opportunity to ramble and talk because I love the sound of my own voice. So, now you'll have noticed that some of the changes that are happening in the office at the gym are geared towards a more studio space. We are not in a studio right now. We are in my home. One lovely morning, my dog Olive is here. We just moved in, so none of my stuff is hung up besides my bookshelves. So feel free to try and figure out what's on the shelves there. And this episode is mainly just so I could kind of test out the microphone and see if I could figure out how to do any of this. So bear with me as we go through. Um, but today, main subject I wanted to talk about was how to essentially make the most out of your training in a broad sense, right? What I mean by that is, if you're someone who's coming in and doing group class, or even your individual design stuff, or working with PT, whatever it might be, how to make the most of that, how to organize your planning, as far as where maybe you need some direction in what you want to do with your training right now, what you should be focusing on, what your intention should be, and stuff like that. Because I think, everyone goes through life cycles at the gym. It kind of starts with like just showing up, and maybe that's a good jumping point, right? You come on down to Lumos, you do an intro, or whatever gym you're at, and you do an intro. Maybe you do some sort of on-ramping program, right? Like for us at Lumos Fitness Collective, we have foundations, which is your 6 one-on-one sessions, just to make sure it doesn't feel like you're getting kicked into the deep end of the pool at the end of the day, right? As soon as you walk in those doors, or whatever your gym's on-ramping looks like. And depending on your background, right, this might be your first opportunity moving into group class setting. It might be your first time training ever. Maybe you have some training background, but maybe the style of training is a little bit different, right? If we're going into like more of a CrossFit type setting or even hybrid type setting, whatever that might look like, you get out of that initial, um, you know, on ramping, and then you're just kind of out there. You're out there in the void, left to make your own decisions and left with your own efforts. And granted, you're in a community setting, and if you're like us at Lumos, the community setting is very deep and very supportive and very much community based. But at the end of the day, every time you walk into the front doors of whatever gym you're at, you're kind of left to your own devices, as far as your own intentions for what your own fitness is. Now, I'm going to speak a little bit to if I could start from zero again. For context, I've been training, doing CrossFit style training for probably somewhere around 10 years at this point, probably a little bit longer. Coming into it, I didn't have really any background in anything. And as far as sports goes, right, I was a musician growing up. I played a little bit of tennis in high school, but not anything too seriously. I didn't really have a background in the gym. So athletics was something very new to me, and I didn't really know how to go about stuff. Even to the point where, like, I didn't even know what, like, working hard felt like to some degree from a physical standpoint. So, you know, we'll start with, like, the stages of training. We'll start about, like, absolute beginner, right? Absolute beginner. You know, there's multiple components that goes into the style training that we do. If we're talking about like mixed modal fitness, where we're doing strength, we're doing skill, we're doing conditioning in the very beginning, and we're talking maybe like 0 to 1 years, right? 0 to 1 years, maybe 0 to 6 months, depending on the person, depending on adaptation, right? There's two usual distinct things that we run into from the coaching side that are usually pretty behind, and that is your base capacity, right? So your capacity to do work over time, right? And your base strength. Now, those are two very big factors, and they're always going to be something that you're working on as you make your journey in fitness. But at the early stages, it's sometimes really difficult to nail down and really difficult to get right in the beginning. So we'll start with capacity, and then we'll talk about strength a little bit, right? If you are someone where your in capacity is just very, very low, where we're talking about, like, for lack of a better phrase, like cardio, right? Your ability to do work for extended periods of time. Every time you're coming into the gym, you're just getting absolutely rattled by anything longer than like 5 minutes of consistent work. Now, that could be happening because of a few different things. It just means, hey, your capacity is just low, and that's okay. That's what we're here to work on. The usual one is that we don't have a great understanding of how to use what we already have. Now, everybody, whether they're brand new or they've been working out for 20 years, has some base level of capacity, right? And it's really just a matter of maximizing it. Okay. Like, some people's ceilings are just going to be lower or higher than others. And it's just about like figuring out where that ceiling is and figuring out how to work underneath it. The more work we do underneath it, the more we're going to be able to expand and draw out more time, and eventually increase our capacity. So if we're starting from absolute zero, or we don't know how to do things, my biggest suggestion when we're talking about like mixed modal metcons, where we got like a run, a wall ball, and like a burpee or something like that, everything needs to be scaled back to a point where you could sustainably work for the given amount of time that you are meant to be working, right? So say we're doing a 20-minute AMRAP of a 400-meter run, 20 wall balls, and I don't know, let's say 15 toes to bar, right? Now, those wall balls are prescribed at 20 and 14 pounds just to keep things standard, right? We're looking at nothing terribly complicated, right? Like, the layout of the workout isn't spectacularly, difficult, But it is a long time. We have a loaded movement in there. We have a gymnastics movement in there that probably isn't acquired if we're starting from like absolute zero, right? Um, so what do we have to do in the beginning? The goal of this workout is to do as many rounds and reps as possible in a 20-minute window. That's what we call like a time priority workout. The goal is to just accumulate as many reps as possible in that time domain. Now, usually on my side of the table, someone super new with no real guidance, just starts, and in the first 5 minutes, they're just like absolutely blasting through the first round. And, they're just trying to figure out what a wall ball is, and they can't do toes to bar. And by 6 minutes in, they're, dry heaving, which is not ideal for anyone's fitness situation, right? So, what do we do? How do we figure things out, right? First one is, are we scaling appropriately, right? We could take a look at all the movements there and go through them one by one, and we're going to figure out how to do that. So we're talking about somebody who has like a basic capacity of nothing, zero, nada, and the goal is to sustain work over a 20-minute period. Well, first thing I would be doing is I would maybe take out that run if we are in a facility that has something like an air runner or a treadmill, right? What I would do is just instead of putting a distance to it, I'm going to take that and bring it to just 2 minutes of running or 2 minutes of jogging, right? At a nice and easy, breezy, conversational pace. Main reason being, some people might not have a ton of run capacity in the bag, right? Running is a thing that most people loathe, or some people love, and 400 meters right out of the gate could be something that has been longer for someone than they've ever done before, which is not uncommon at all. So I like to think instead of worrying about the distance itself, how about we worry about the time at which that run is meant to be and just make it so that it's 2 minutes at your pace. With the workout is meant to be like 2 minutes of running for that 400. So we're going to scale things back and we're just going to do 2 minutes on the runner or the treadmill or whatever. Or if you're in open, like jog it out 1 minute if you have a watch or something like that, and then jog it back in for another minute. And there you go. You got your 2 minutes, and right away, we're already in way better control of this workout, other than maybe overextending ourselves from a volume standpoint if 400 meters of running have just like never been done before, or you just don't know how to go about doing it. It's all about bringing control in that situation. Now, if we don't have a runner or something like that, just do 2 minutes on a machine, right? Sometimes machines are a little bit more controllable from a contraction standpoint. Running is very open to, what's your cadence look like? How do you run? Do you know how to run well? If you don't, like, is this just like beating you up more than anything else? Yada, yada, yada. If we have a bike, and that's probably what I would choose in this situation if we're going to talk about a machine, I would probably just have somebody do 2 minutes, nice and easy on the bike. That way they're fully in control of it every single time that they come back to it. C2 bike or an assault bike, whatever that might be, is super controllable. It doesn't require any skill like a rower would or a ski would, right? You just sit on there and pedal your legs and you're totally good to go. And I think, most people could do that, not assuming we don't have any other external factors that we need to consider like injury or condition. And right away, that 400-meter run has now become something that we're in control of overall. Now let's move on to the wall ball, right? We have a 400-meter run, 20 wall ball, 15 toes to bar. So we've already scaled that first part, and now we're going to go to 20 wall balls. Now, wall balls are a big movement, right? Where at some point we're throwing something in the air. We have to receive it well, right? First thing we're always looking at is load, right? Wall balls are a very rhythmic movement. It's about kind of finding a flow state, finding your own rhythm with it, so you can execute reps well and move efficiently. Now, if somebody has like a decent level of strength, all we need to worry about for out of the get-go is we are going to just lower the amount of reps, right? Now, this is more dependent. I'm going to assume that the coach in this class is going to say, I want everyone to do something that they could either do the reps unbroken or in at most 2 sets, meaning like either they're doing all 20 straight through or they're doing 10 and 10. Okay. So we need to find a load that allows us to do that. Now, I most likely wouldn't tell the person to shoot for something unbroken because that's just a lot of moving for somebody coming in with less capacity in one shot, especially with something that's pretty dynamic, which might not be something that they're used to. And then also now thinking about on top of that, they're coming off of a bike, row, run, whatever they ended up scaling to. So they're already coming in compromised. And this is just round one. So what I'm going to think about is, okay, I'm going to put them on the path of 10 and 10, and I'm going to find something super light that's going to allow them to not just make their way through those 10 reps at a time, but do them well, right? We're trying to look at all our points of performance, making sure we're hitting depth, making sure we're moving well, staying upright, hitting the target, all that stuff. And that's what you want to look for. Like, what is going to allow you to express the stimulus of the workout the best so you can make the most of the time that you are moving, right? Say this person, I just gave him a 20-pound wall ball or 14-pound wall ball. I was like, yeah, go get after it. You'll figure it out. You'll be fine. It's 20 minutes no matter what. Good to go, right? You know, it always comes back to the stimulus, right? If this is meant to be like 4 minutes around, just throwing around arbitrary numbers, and everyone else in class who's been there for a while does 4 to 5 rounds, and then this new person comes in and does 2, not much happened there, right? We could look at the total amount of reps that everybody else did and the total amount of reps this new person did, and you just see straight away 2 very different workouts were happening. So it's always a game of like getting to what is going to allow you to express the stimulus of the workout best. And if that's not explained to you at some point by the coach or in your program or whatever is going on, you either have to ask that question, right, for some clarification, or you need to find a new coach or program. And that it is so important to have an understanding of what you are doing before you go into any task. And it's so important to your fitness and making sure you start on the right foot. Not even start on the right foot. In the future, whether you've been doing this for 5 minutes or 5 years, knowing what you're doing is so, like, knowing the intention of every workout that you're doing is so important. So, little side tangent here, like, always know the stimulus, always understand what the objective is in the workout, and make sure that you either ask that question or your program is designed in a way so you have an understanding of what is going on. Now, back to our wall ball, right? So say that person's able to do 10, they scale down the weight of the wall ball, they're able to do 10 with good movement standards, things like that, then that's where we're going to go with, right? And I'd even throw in some like very aggressive braking. Okay, like if you're going to do 10 wall balls, you're going to rest for 15 seconds no matter how you feel, and then you're going to do another 10 wall balls, right? If it's on right, we're probably going to land in that right time range of like a minute-ish, depending on the person. Okay, so now we have 2 minutes on a machine or 2 minutes of rowing at an easy pace. We have a very modified wall ball weight. Let's talk about this. What if the loading's too heavy no matter what you do? What if the movement of the medicine of the wall ball is too much for a newer person to handle? Or the load, if you're a more experienced person, is just too heavy? Again, it all comes back to the stimulus. If your coach tells you want to do something at 10 and 10, think outside of the wall ball, right? Could we do 2 sets of 10 air squats? Could we do 2 sets of 10 squats with the med ball, but we're not throwing it? Okay. Can we sustain that? Because we're not even thinking about 1 round. We're thinking about 20 minutes. We're thinking about the goal being 4 to 5 rounds, right? So as a newer person, I'm always telling people like, go with the base level, whatever the easiest version of this is, because it's all about just staying moving, right? And not creating bottlenecks for yourself at the end of the day. Bottlenecks being something that's going to stop you from moving further in your workout because either you do not have the acquired skill or the loading is too heavy or whatever that might be, and just kind of puts the brakes on a workout wherever you are. That's what I'm usually referring to as a bottleneck. Now, we have that. We're going. We're doing things, right? We got 2 minutes on a machine. We have our wall ball or med ball squat or air squat, whatever we end up doing, whatever is going to allow us to express that movement in 2 sets of 10 sustainably for 20 minutes. Now we have our toes to bar, right? Toes to bar being a higher skill gymnastics movement with, to get that, you need a disproportionate amount of strength. You need to have the skill of kipping really down. You need to have the structural integrity of the body down to make sure you can sustain that many reps over the course of 20 minutes. So right away, we're just scaling yet again, right? Coach probably said you want to break this up in 2 to 3 sets, right? So we're thinking like 10-5, 8-7, maybe 5-5-5, depending on the person, right? So it's all about finding that thing that's going to allow us to do that. Now, some people that might be, ab mat sit-ups on the ground. We're not even hanging from the bar. Totally fine, right? It's all about whether or not you could sustain it, whether you not could come out of the other side of that work, that movement, and move on to the next thing, right? For some, that might be a hanging knee raise. It might be a kipping knee raise, a straight leg raise, right? More experienced, it's toes to bar, and figuring out like how many we could do in a palatable bite-sized set and repeat over and over and get us through the workout. And yeah, so just again, finding something that's going to allow us to express sustainability for 20 minutes. So at the end of this, we're looking at, 2 minutes on a machine or 2 minutes of running. We have 20 reps of a squat variation based off of the wall ball, so whether that's a lighter wall ball, a med ball squat, or an air squat. And then we have our 15 toes to bar or ab mat sit up or V up or hanging knee raise or straight leg raise. And, this is me kind of figuring out how to ramble on about subjects at the end of the day, right? But the whole goal being in those beginning stages, when your or even in later stages, when your focus is on increasing your capacity, it is about understanding the stimulus of the workout that you are doing, whether it's 5 minutes or 35 minutes, right? And then setting yourself up in that workout to express that stimulus, right? I like to say, the workout is, Metcons are a tool, and the movements within that Metcon are also tools within it, right? It is not, when we are practicing conditioning and trying to increase our capacity, we are using Metcons as a way to do that instead of going on like long runs and stuff. And the stuff within that Metcon is just like the tools to get there, right? They are not necessarily what we are trying to work on in that moment. In the grand scheme of things, we're learning all of these other movements so that we could use them to put them in Metcons later to therefore increase our capacity. So especially in the beginning, and we could talk a little bit about like intermediate and advanced athletes in a little bit as I kind of ramble on here. It's just about moving. It's just about sustaining output. If you do that first round of the workout we just talked about and you're able to move right into the next one and right into the next one and right into the next one, and then you look up and for the first time you realize you moved consistently for 20 minutes for the first time in 10 years or whatever it might be, that's the win. That's the whole thing, right? That's going to serve you way more long term if you could repeat that process consistently week after week after week after week after week. That's going to serve you way more than coming in, not really paying attention to what you're doing, be like, I'm going RX because I want to be, this, that, and the next thing, and just getting buried 5 days a week and then burnt out and then most likely not even continuing with all this. It is all about getting things right for you, not right for what's on the board when you first start. And also, this is me just saying, like, it also at all times, but, I'm speaking to like a beginner's experience, right? Scale things back, focus on moving, focus on output, right? Ask that question of like, what is the intention of this workout? Are we supposed to get 2 rounds or are we supposed to be getting 8? Like, because those are 2 very different scaling systems happening right there, depending on what the workout is, right? Is this supposed to be heavy? Is this supposed to be a slower feeling workout? Is this supposed to be a sprint feel, right? the intention behind a workout is so important because it allows you the opportunity to make it so that you could achieve that stimulus well, in a way that, like, I always say it, like, you want to be doing the workouts. You don't want the workouts to just be happening to you over and over again. Uh, so that in the beginning is the most important thing, is just making sure you are able to sustain output for whatever duration of the time you're asked, and just not worrying about all the things within the Metcon. Yes, we want to acquire skills. Yes, we want to get stronger. Yes, one day I want to be able to do those toes bar. 100% valid. But like in the beginning, when we're overcoming just like getting moving again, that's way down the track. Not even way. It might be like a few months away, or like a month, depending on the person, right? But it's so important to just like make sure you're not getting throttled every day for a while. Now, once you get past that stage, right, it becomes, if we're talking about like intermediate and advanced athletes, it becomes a little bit more of IQ and using what you have and applying it well, right? So if we look back at that, you know, first workout, right, of like a 400-meter run, 20 wall balls and 15 toes bar. We'll talk about like intermediate and advanced briefly. What does that whole process look like for you, and how do you create expression out of that and sustainability? Well, now we've acquired more tools. And we're also a little bit fitter. We're a little bit stronger. Maybe we have some skills in our back pocket, right? But that does not mean that, okay, I am entitled to doing this as it is written on the board yet sometimes, right? Because just because I could do 3 toes to bar here and there doesn't mean I could do 15 in a workout, and doesn't mean I even should, right? Just because I sometimes use the 20-pound wall ball or the 14-pound wall ball, whatever it is, in partner workouts here and there doesn't mean that a workout like that is the one I should be using it for. We're going to find out the stimulus of the workout. We're going to stick to our 20-minute AMRAP of 420 wall balls, 15 toes bar, and just keep that consistent, right? Now, let's say intermediate. We have the skill of toes to bar, but it's not polished yet by any means, right? We have a 20-pound or a 14-pound wall ball in our back pocket. It's still a little bit outside of a range. Like, you asked me to do more than 10 at a time, and I'm like, maybe. It's ugly, but it's doable, right? Now, is that still going to allow you to get that 4 to 5 rounds that your coach prescribed to you when they brief the workout or put in the notes or whatever it might be? Whatever that is, we still want to adhere to that, no matter what our ego in the back of our head is saying, right? Now, the goal is still 4 to 5 rounds. So if you're an intermediate and maybe we have some of those skills and we use some of those weights, there's a few different things we could go about. Now we're running, right? Maybe we've overcome our hatred of running. And now we're getting out there and we're doing the damn thing. I'm going to have a sip of my coffee from this lovely mug from my buddy Rio, who everyone loves. It's all about working within our means, or figuring out what we want to be working on. Oh gosh, I'm feeling another gigantic rant coming along, but I'm going to keep this brief, and we're going to tack this down, and we're going to talk about another conversation later about how to work on stuff within a workout. Oh God, my brain's exploding. We're going to figure out what is going to allow us to sustain output, right? Your coach might tell you, instead of 15 toes to bar, do like 10. Do a set of 4 and 2 sets of 3, right? If that's what you can work with right now, and if that is something that still feels proficient to you, maybe it's that. Maybe it's doing half toes to bar, half kipping leg raises, something like that. Okay. Same thing for the wall ball. Maybe 20 pounds is like something you could do every now and again, but you're definitely past the point of doing 10. Well, why not hit that 14 and see how that feels, right? The goal is always just, what can we sustain? and setting yourself up for that. So now it gets a little bit more complicated because you have so many other things to choose from. And I am electing right now to not do like a 9-hour rant on this because we simply don't have time. Or I just wanted to keep this one short in the beginning. And, I ramble pretty hard here. We'll label this one as we're going to talk about, um, you know, your for a beginner's metcon and how to perform them or something. Um, but like I said, it's all about sustainability. Now, on the strength side of things, now we get to have a little bit more fun. We're talking about strength because, like I said, we talked about earlier, the two biggest things I see with newer people is that we lack the strength and we lack the capacity usually pretty hard in the beginning for like absolute beginners. I'm not talking about someone who played like D1 football, but they also have never done like CrossFit before or something like that. That's not what I'm talking about in this situation. I'm talking about someone who's been like mostly sedentary for a long time or has like no athletic background or whatever it might be, or like me, was just in marching band for a long time and decided they wanted to be healthier. Um, on the strength side of things, it's kind of the same spiel. And when I say strength, I mean like isolated strength work. I'm not talking about loaded stuff in a metcon or conditioning piece at this point. I'm talking about our squats. I'm talking about our deadlifts. I'm talking about our pressing, our Olympic weightlifting, whatever that might be. Actually, I'm going to keep Olympic weightlifting out of this. That's a whole other conversation to be had. But I'm talking about like our pull-ups, our push-ups, our pressing, our squatting, our deadlifting, our benching, whatever that might be. Again, it's about expression, right? Now, in the beginning, this is almost like a backwards conversation. And me and Noah have talked about this a lot. Especially with newer people, it's strength is a little bit harder to figure out because we don't know what their ceiling is. And you run the risk of two things: either overshooting like right away and we're like failing reps day in and day out, or undershooting for way too long, right? We're talking about, we're doing 95 pounds on a back squat for a year because like we've like this notion of like, well, I've never done 100 before and we're not supposed to max out today. In the beginning, it's just important to be making sure that the numbers are trending upwards, right? Start light, focus on your movement, focus on good technique, all that stuff, super important. But as we get moving and as you get more comfortable with the movements themselves and you're at a point where you could express them well, right? And, if you have coaches in the room with you, they're going to let you know and they're going to give you good feedback. And this is why it's so important to have good coaches, at Lumos. I know my coaches. I'm one of them, and I know all the other coaches. They're great. They're good at their job. If you're listening to this, you most likely are coached by us. That's why you're listening to this. It's so important to make sure that you're moving well before we go into these things. Now, once assuming everything we've sharpened things up and we're moving great, then it's mostly a game of just paying attention. So nothing is more frustrating from the coaching side of the table, at least, than okay, we're on week 3 of this back squat cycle. We're once again we're doing 5 sets of 3. We're working up to a heavy set of 3 for the day. RP 8, whatever it might be, should be a little bit heavier than whatever you did last week. Does everyone know what they did last week? And I watch everyone's eyes glaze over and they have no idea, right? Not only is it frustrating just from please pay attention, everyone, but you have no idea how much you're impeding your own progress by not paying attention to what you're doing on the strength side of things, right? And this isn't even for loaded stuff. It's for your pull-ups, it's for your push-ups, whatever strict work we're doing in class. Like, you need to be paying attention. What I mean by that is you need to make sure the total amount of volume and the total amount of load that you are doing week in and week out is moving upwards. That old concept of progressive overload. We are progressively loading more and more weight, whether that be through the amount of reps that we're doing at a load or, repeating the same scheme and adding more to it week in, week out, right? progressively overloading and building strength in those patterns, right? It's super important, and the reason I say it's super important because it's really easy. Like, if you did 5 sets of back squats and you did a set at 100, 105, 110, 115, 120, and 125, just write it down. Okay? That's it. All you got to do is write it down. Whether that's in your notes app on your phone or you're using Beyond the Whiteboard, what we have at Lumos or whatever it might be, just write it down. It takes like 10 seconds. Just do it. As soon as you finish your last set, go over to your phone, go over to your notebook, grab a post-it note, tattoo your body. I don't care. Write it down so that the next week when you come in and I ask, we're going to go, okay, we do a little bit heavier this week because we're progressively overloading whatever pattern we're doing. You do a little bit more. Right? Strength is so simple. It's difficult to get strong because it takes a long time, but it's also really easy to figure out because you just need to be paying attention. And if it sounds like my tone has changed recently, it's because I love seeing progress and I hate seeing people not want it for themselves. That drives me like crazy. Because it is so easy and it just requires like a little bit of intention, right? And you write that down on a sticky note or whatever it is, right? And you just do a little bit heavier than the previous week, the following week, and you do that for, I don't know, 10, 12 weeks, whatever it might be, 6-week block, 8-week block, 12-week block, whatever it might be. That's a lot of weight. That's a lot stronger, especially if you're new. Right? Especially if your ceiling's really low to start, especially if you're new, that's a lot of weight to move. And that's a lot of progress to be had in not a ton of time. Now, for those of us who have been doing this for a long time, it's a little bit different, but we're talking about it in like those beginner intermediate stages. Strength is great. Like, we've seen it around the gym where like every week somebody PRs because they're like, oh, well, it felt fine, right? Like, if you're new or on the newer end of the spectrum, like, we don't know what your max is, right? Your max at one point could have just been something because your technique was bad, and then we cleaned that up, and now we have no idea. So the goal is just paying attention and making sure we're adding a little bit more as we go every week. And that could even be something as simple as I'm adding 5 pounds more to one set. It's still more, right? If I did 105, 110, 115, 120, 125 the first week, I could do 110, 110 in those first 2 sets instead of 105 and 110. It's still more. Okay. Now, granted, we would like to add it to all of them, but like, it's not this all or nothing thing. And that only works if you know what you did the previous week. Okay. Now, and this is to say, there's so much more details into strength in particular, but again, I'm taking a beginner's eye here of just like, a lot of it is just paying attention and coming in with the right intentions. And a lot of this could just be aired out by talking to your coach, right? Ask questions. We have a Slack channel. You could reach out to any of us at any point in time, which is an insanely dangerous tool. You have a coach right in front of you when you're in class, or if you're not at, Lumos with us, and you're at a gym like ours, you most likely have a coach in front of you, and I hope that they know the stimulus of their own workouts, right? That's super important. Ask the questions, be inquisitive, right? That's part of being intentional, and part of paying attention is knowing, like, understanding the moment you don't have the information that you need and solving that problem. And in the beginning, it's just so important to know the objective, right? So you can make strides to complete it. And if you don't know that objective and you spend a year missing that objective and not understanding what's going on or not caring what's going on or whatever it is, like, I get it. It's some days you just want to come in, do your workout, and leave, and you don't want to have to think about things. I totally understand that. It's incredibly valid. We all go through stages or days or whatever it is like that. As someone who does this for a living, I do it very often where I just shut my brain off and I work out and I'm like, I moved today. Cool. Totally valid. But if we're talking about like getting fit, right, you need to be paying attention. It doesn't happen by accident. It's not just like, oh, I went to the gym today. Great. I expect to be significantly fitter in X amount of months. It's just not going to happen that way. And I wish it did. Life would be a lot easier. My job would be a lot easier for sure. But it is something that you unfortunately need to invest in yourself in. And if you're new and you're starting a gym membership, you're already financially invested. So why wouldn't you want to make the most of that? You know, all this is to say, like, in the beginning, it's about showing up, understanding what you're doing in the sense of like, not like you need to know everything. You just need to know the objective for that day. And that requires asking a coach or looking at your program or having the notes that you need, whatever that might look like. And then the third thing would just be like paying attention to all of it. And luckily we're at a facility where everyone's willing to lend a helping hand, whether that's people in the community. We have so many amazing members who are always willing to answer questions because they've been on the same path before and they've been there and they know what it feels like. We have so many coaches, like all of us this is our full-time job. This is the only thing we give a shit about. Like we want to be there for people. We want people to have an incredible experience, and that's our whole goal. Not just like it for the hour that the person's there, but for the entire life cycle of at our gym. Like all the tools are there. You just got to use them, and that's the biggest thing. So, yeah, where are we at? We're at 41 minutes, which is an exorbitant amount of time for me to be talking. Like I said, everyone, this was mainly a test run. I apologize if I rambled on incessantly and didn't really get to a point at any point, but I just wanted to give it a go and see if I could get the microphone working and make sure that my camera works and I know how to use our little thingy over here. Shout out to Steve Sullivan for helping me pick out the right equipment and getting us all hooked up. The goal is to do more of these. We're going to put together a better structure. I'm going to have other people on, the studio, aka the office, aka the home for action potential, aka where coaches have their meetings, aka where I eat my lunch. Has it set up so we have 2 mics for 2 people. I'm going to be getting the other coaches on. I'm going to be getting the dynamic doctor duo, Catherine and Chase on. I want to have some members on, maybe some people in the Austin area who are willing to come on and talk about whether they're coaches or this and that. Like the goal is to just get as much information to everyone as possible and talk about things as we go. So yeah, if you've made it this far, good Lord, why? But thank you so much. I'm going to close this one out. Hopefully you took something from this. Yeah, who knows? It'll be fun to look back at this one in a year and see what it looks like. But that's all for me. Coach Sean signing off, and I'll see you around the gym.